Good evening and welcome to Business 7. With the rest of Namibia, Business 7 mourns the loss of its late president, Hage Geingob. Join us tonight as we speak to an internationally renowned political analyst about the man who was Hage Geingob.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Few people know the political history of Namibia and its current developments, as well as the political analyst, Professor Henning Melber. He is not just internationally renowned for his views, he's also an author and an esteemed academic. We caught up with Professor Melber on Zoom, and the photographs that we're going to use as overlay in this interview shows Hage Geingob as the man of the people. The photos we didn't always see because, as Professor Melber described the late president, he was also a mensch. You described Hage Geingob as an outlier and that he had many qualities that distinguished himself as a president to Namibians. What were those?
First of all, while he was still the youngest of the three presidents, being a member of the first struggle generation, being a veteran of the anti-colonial movement, he had a different socialization. The moment he left Namibia with a short stopover in Botswana, he spent 10 years in the USA, where he studied at three different universities. He made a BA and an MA. He represented SWAPO at the United Nations. So that made him very different also in his role and function within the movement in exile. And he then became a highly remunerated official United Nations employee as director of the United Nations Institute in Lusaka. Now that brought him back to the inner circle of SWAPO in exile, but he was still on a different category. And I think all of that made him also in his style of governance visibly different from his two predecessors. Maybe in a little bit of a flippant way, you could say he was a liberal modernist. He left behind this equation that SWAPO is the nation and the nation is SWAPO, which was our slogan during the struggle days. For him, the new metaphor he created in his acceptance speech was the Namibian house. So I think that was markedly different from the previous 25 years of governance in Namibia. And even those in Namibia who had this internalized aversion against SWAPO and as a consequence against the president representing SWAPO, I think to some extent felt recognized, felt included. And I think this is what we could pick up on Sunday, and since then, in the way people, and notably the leaders of political opposition parties, responded. Listening to Bernardo Swartboy, my ears almost fell off, knowing the story he shared with Hage. Listening to all the others, there was this recognition and respect which he would have never got at lifetime. Maybe you could say, understandably so, because then he was a political opponent. He is not any longer a political opponent. He is now perceived as the President Hage, who was very much so a man of the people. He was not the ascete like Pohamba or Nujoma. He enjoyed life. He then made a very remarkable pact with Monica Calondo. And pact is, of course, too negative a term. What I find striking is, in the 9 years of their marriage, he respected Monica Geingob as an equal. He tolerated her personal space in public life. She became a first lady like neither Namibia nor hardly any other country on the continent has ever been privileged with. She is an internationally recognized individual person in her own right. Now you could say that's the times of emancipation. So what? Well, it means a lot. And I think that Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah is the first female candidate who might become the next president of Namibia, is to some extent also a result of Hage's governance. I'm well aware that the zebra resolution was taken under Hifikepunye Pohamba, so credit also has to go to him. But it was Hage Geingob who implemented it not only with the zebra list for the National Assembly elections, he recruited women as deputy ministers and ministers to an extent that basically half of the cabinet is female. He was very gender aware. And I think that's one of the things that comes, and in the political discourse of Namibia, you're not making a point of it. You start to realize that when you look back and think, what's his track record?
Every day, you make choices that make you legendary. Journey together with us on the path to securing your legacy as a member of the League of Legends. With the Select Platinum Bundle Fee Premium Bank offering, you will access tools that will enable you to thrive. If you earn 850,000 Namibian dollars per annum or more, you can apply for this offering today via bankvinted.com.na for only 447 Namibian dollars per month. Bank Vinted, a member of Capricorn Group.
Where he failed is the mantra of fighting corruption, where the question again would be, which is a general question, is this an individual failure? And is he individually only to be blamed, being responsible for that? Or is it not the inherent problem of a system? The same with being the president who candidated, who campaigned as candidate to be the president of prosperity. That made him the president of unfulfilled promises. It was wishful thinking. But then again, could he anticipate that by the time he moved into office in 2015, the fat years which Namibia enjoyed in macroeconomics were over, that no savings were made, and that Namibia was, in terms of fiscal prudence, not prepared for the meager years to come. Some of the worst droughts in the country's history, and then even made worse by COVID-19. Geingob deserved praise and was respected for the way of the crisis management in COVID-19. But it didn't help to protect the country and the people from the devastating consequences. So, would there be anyone else as president who would have been able to overcome those externally caused obstacles and create prosperity? For Geingob, I think, to some extent rightly so, there was light at the end of at the horizon. If you revisit his speech for the new year, which was, as I myself criticized, quite a mouthful. But he was able to make reference to quite a degree of recovery. This year, Namibia is back to the macroeconomic situation it had been in 2015. And you could actually say that's a merit. It was very difficult. It was an uphill battle. So the fact that Namibia is back at that, you could, without being overtly generous, take as giving credit to President Geingob. And I'm sure he was full of optimism. He was always full of optimism,
Yes.
but he was full of optimism that by the time he leaves office, with the discovery of major resources in gas and oil and green hydroenergy, with the vision that Namibia will become the energy hub of the continent, that he might have anticipated by the time he leaves office, he will indeed be back on track as the president under whose governance Namibia became prosperous, or at least paved the way for prosperity to come. So I think, notwithstanding the fact that there are certain etiquettes in obituaries where you shouldn't be too critical, if you are fair, one needs to give recognition to that president for many of those reasons I mentioned. That actually, and that's also how I read the responses of ordinary people and of people in higher political ranks, that he was not that bad. And he was a mensch, most importantly.
Let me show you something.
Don't worry. Next time, I check nice.
Thanks, but it's okay. FNB Insurance checks nicer.
At FNB Insurance, we provide cover for all your valuables, from your phone to your laptop to your car. FNB Insurance. You value it, we cover it. T's and C's apply.
He leaves a gap. It will be very difficult to fill his shoes, if only in character. He was a very unique character. And maybe also in terms of rather sophisticated governance. He was a political strategist, make no mistake. That was another outlier. He was not reliant or dependent on a home base. I'm sorry for the noise, this incoming mails, which
I've got the same problem here, don't worry.
He had no home base to rely on. He was the first president not coming from the north of the country, which spoke in his favor among parts of the electorate, where they said we become more multicultural in perspective, which I'm sure was true. So the political career he made and the amazing recovery from being ousted in 2002 was not least part to his ability to be a political strategist. I should, however, also add it was also a result of Pohamba's reconciliatory politics, because Hifikepunye Pohamba, once in office from 2005, was the one who offered his hands to the returning Hage Geingob. But that Hage Geingob then was not only welcomed back in the party, being the family, but that he made his career to be the next president to replace Pohamba. That was to a large extent due to his ability to mobilize, to campaign, to apply political strategies, which I'm not so sure many others without such a home base in the north would have been able to achieve. So that also, looking back, should be something one should give him recognition for. That we had this smooth, dignified transition on Sunday, I dare to say, is partly a result of the legacy of Hage. And I'm very sure if there is a place from where he watches, he would be proud.
We turn to our interview with Professor Henning Melber, but this time he speaks about Nangolo Mbumba, Namibia's new president. You know President Mbumba rather well. How do you feel about his appointment?
It's the best choice. Under the given circumstances of extraordinary crisis situation, there wouldn't be any other person that would come to my mind. Not only because he was supposed to be the successor. It's strictly following the constitutional book. There was no other choice. And SWAPO refrained from any fiddling around, which is very important in signs of stability, in reassuring investors' confidence, making the point that there are African countries like Namibia, and they do not meet the misperceptions of, oh, typically African. This is a functioning democracy following the rule of law and constitutional principles, full stop. And that Nangolo, as the obvious choice, the only legally correct choice, is now the caretaker, is the best that could happen to Namibia. He underlined that point by making as a first statement when taking the oath to say, don't panic, I'm not achieving another term in office. I mean, where on earth in African countries do you hear that? So he is a servant, as far as I know him, a loyal servant to the people. He was a loyal party follower, following the duties, a little bit like Hifikepunye Pohamba, being loyal to the party. You're not involved in intrigues, in power struggles, in manipulations. I've never perceived him as being interested in our own big career. He got the career maybe just exactly because he was never interested in a career. Solid, delivering, not claiming high grounds, not being a high flyer, being absolutely down to earth. I think that's exactly what we need for the transitional period until the elections in November, and then for the taking over of office of a new generation, which then will be the moment in time. Even if Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, if she remains the candidate, which we have to see with the SWAPO Extraordinary Congress, will be a member of the second struggle generation. And I always have the feeling she was able to become the first female candidate because she is part of the old struggle generations. So it's basically who we know, that's okay, you know, even if it's a woman, so to say. But I worked closely with Nangolo Mbumba for 2 years in the early 1980s, when we collaborated on drafting the first social studies textbook for Namibian students in exile. And not only is he family in that sense, he is the one I would always trust. And I think the notion of trust is such a social capital and asset that it's more important than anything else. I think he will just be an administrator. He will not rock the boat. He will try to act in what he would perceive how Hage Geingob would have done it. I think they understood each other very well. And he would define his mandate to take care of Namibia as an orderly country, where the confidence in the political culture and in the macroeconomic stability will not be put at risk. I hope that Nangolo would agree with that rather positive assessment.
He's a very humble man, but I'm sure he will acknowledge it. Professor Melber, as a parting comment, do you have any message for Namibia in this time?
Don't waste the achievements under the Geingob presidency. And I say that mainly to my SWAPO comrades, who might be tempted in the forthcoming extraordinary Congress to reverse a decision that was taken at the last Congress when Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah was voted not only again into the deputy president position, but by doing so as the presidential candidate for the November elections. Don't be tempted to boycott that and change the decisions. Don't expose the party and the country to a power struggle. What we need is continued stability. Namibia has managed to a large extent to overcome the economic setbacks of the last 10 years. We talked about that. It has maintained a remarkable degree of stability. And it's the political stability which is the main asset for potential investors. Don't rock the boat. And as I always stress with pride myself, when it comes to interviews the last days, mainly in South Africa, one needs to keep in mind, in the 34 years of Namibian independence, has not been a single known politically motivated killing. Look around in the region. Where else do you find that? In the 34 years, to my knowledge, I'm speaking under correction to a journalist, has not been a single journalist in the country imprisoned. Where do you find that in the region or on the continent? Don't put that at risk. And that would mean follow Hage's policy.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Thank you for joining Business 7 tonight. We'll see you again next week. Until then, stay safe.